Dredge is the latest release from New Zealand-based developer Black Salt Games and published by Team 17. Since its release on March 30th, 2023, the Lovecraftian fishing game has seen huge success on Steam, Xbox, PlayStation and Switch. Prior to the game's launch, I was lucky to sit down with two developers behind Dredge, Ritchie and Mikey Bastiaens, to talk all about the game leading up to its release. I'd like to thank Complete Xbox for setting up this interview, and if you'd like to check out my full review of Dredge, you can do so over at completexbox.co.uk. With that being said, let's sail our way into the interview. Perfect. I'm joined here by Ritchie and Mikey Bastiaens, who are both artists and I suppose jack of all trades on the latest upcoming indie Cthulhu-like, is that what people are calling it, or Lovecraftian-centric fishing game, Dredge, which, first of all, guys, I have to say, I've been playing it over the last week and a half now since we got a code, and by God, it's probably one of the best games I've played in a long, long time. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. I do wholly mean that as well. I was completely caught off guard by the game. I just kind of saw it, and it had the potential, I think, to be something that really didn't click with me, or something that just dived me for hours. And then I think I knew I was kind of into it when I was on the third day, and I looked at my playtime, it was like 12 hours, and I was like, God, I really need to be doing other stuff. But it's great to have you both here. And I suppose I kind of do want to start off with that question, because there's been a few previews that have gone up already about the game, namely from IGN, and I know Clip was another one as well that I followed along with as well, and that was a great video. And you know, you guys must be so excited now. I mean, it's the 23rd there for you, but it's the 22nd for me as we're recording, so that's a weird like sort of time difference thing. But you're about a week away now from the game's full launch on March 30th. How are you feeling? You must be are you silently optimistic? Are you nervous? Is it a mix of both? Kind of walk me through it.
For me, it's like at least that whole nervous excitement sort of thing, because yeah, like you mentioned, it's getting some awesome sort of like early reviews and stuff like that are like really exciting to us. But then we're just waiting for everything else to kind of like, oh, but is it actually what they think when they play through the entire game, or is it just this little bit here? So fingers crossed that it's actually as good as everyone is saying as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit nervous because we're coming up to, there's going to be like reviews coming out and stuff. It was pretty crazy to me to see NoClip do that video. You know, I've been a fan of NoClip's videos and Danny for ages. That was pretty surreal. But yeah, I'm not so nervous about the release for some reason. I feel like we're kind of like, you know, we're looking pretty good. We've got things sorted, but who knows what kind of chaos is gonna catch me off guard.
Yeah, I think the main thing I thought, I was like, this game is in good standing, because very rarely do you get a code to review a game so long in advance nowadays. And I was like, this is fantastic. I can sit back, relax with it. And I didn't come across any bugs, not that I know of. So I'm sorry if that didn't want to give you guys a mini heart attack there or anything, but I didn't come across anything, and I thoroughly enjoyed everything I was playing of it, and just everything about it seemed to click so well. I want to ask quickly though, before we kind of dive in a bit more to Dredge, and I am obviously aware that this review will come up either just a little bit before or on the day of release of the game, so I don't want to dive into spoilers or anything like that, because I want people to experience this firsthand. I do want to ask though, prior, because obviously you guys are a small team, how do you guys kind of work around coming up with the ideas for projects? Is it a collaborative effort of something that all of you kind of pitch in ideas for, sort of in like a sort of a game jam-esque sort of way of what might be nice to do, and then you kind of pick on one idea, or is it kind of more collaborative, you're all working on one game and you're like, okay, let's go with that?
Well, it's kind of both. So it's kind of like that game jam thing that you talked about, where we kind of like have a whole bunch of ideas and we discuss them, and they kind of like mutate as we talk about them, and then we design them out, and then we pick some to prototype, and then prototyping and playtesting is a big part of our kind of process as well. We did that with Dredge. We made a quick 2-week prototype and playtested that with people and got all of the feedback, and that's kind of how we decided to go ahead with that one.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really makes that easy for us is we kind of do, before we even figure out what the game's going to be, we kind of figure out what kind of games we want to make and what kind of games we don't want to make. And then we just kind of pick ideas that kind of align with all of our sort of like ideas. Well, we want to be making this kind of game. So if we're going to pitch an idea to each other, then it has to kind of fit within these sort of like boxes, I guess. And then that makes things a lot easier, because then it kind of feels like whatever game idea that does come up with, we're all kind of like, oh, that's a cool idea. That's a cool idea. And like, I'm not sure which one I actually want to go with, because I'd be fine with any of them. And that's when we get into that prototyping phase and we pick up, I think, some of the best ones that we kind of had an idea for. And we just kind of like did really quick prototypes. Like Alex mentioned, it was like 2 weeks for the Dredge prototype initially. And I think it was the same for a couple other ones that we did those things for as well.
Yeah. Just out of interest kind of on that, what was the sort of, how long was the development period of Dredge? Like, are we talking a year, 2 years, maybe more, maybe less? What's that sort of looking like?
It's been around about 2 years, I think.
Yeah,
from
because I asked that because...
the like actual release sort of thing, it's about 2 years.
Yeah.
Because I asked that because I was reading an interview recently with, obviously, big in the news at the moment, Neil Druckmann, as always, with The Last of Us and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, we weren't working on a huge AAA title, but he did talk about a little bit about how you need to be really committed to the idea of going into a game, first of all, because if you end up going maybe halfway through the development cycle and you feel burnt out by the idea, then you're going to be like, oh God, it's going to be a strain to even get this to the finish line, and you don't want to dump something you've put so much time and effort into. Am I safe to say that throughout the entirety of Dredge, you were just very much like bouncing ideas, loving everything about it, or was there a stage where you were kind of like, is this going to work? Will people like this?
How many more fish do you want to be drawing?
Yeah, I'm done with fish for now. I don't want to draw any more fish. But for the most part, it was like, because we were designing and iterating as we go. We're a small studio, so we're pretty agile. We can like change and test things out, which I guess big studios probably can't. I don't know. So that keeps it interesting and fresh. Like we can try out our new ideas and we all design together. There's a lot of stuff that keeps it interesting. But there was also a little bit of, like I said with the fish, there were times where it's just like, now I just have to do all of these things and all of these things. And yeah, there's a lot of work in there as well.
Yeah, I think what kept things really fresh is because we got all the different types of like different zones within the game. And because each of them had their own sort of unique way of playing or dealing with an obstacle within each zone, that just meant that we were just coming into pretty much a new way of approaching each area each time. So that was something that kept things fresh. And then, of course, then there's towards the end, it's like, all right, now we've got to fix all the kind of bugs that are popping up. And it's like whack-a-mole where you pop one down and the next one pops up. Like, okay, let's deal with that one. Let's deal with that one. But that's just typical development cycles, I think, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the fish are a huge part of the game. I want to talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's the number one advertised thing on the website when you go onto Dredge, like over more than 125 fish available in the game. So, I mean, you put the hard work in, so you need to make sure everyone knows about it now. Yeah. Whose idea was it to make a fish that takes up 5 boxes going in one direction and completely mess up my inventory throughout the entirety of the game?
That's probably Joel.
Yeah, I think that's definitely Joel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Speaking on the idea of Dredge, I mean, we talked on it a little bit, but like, where did you come up with the idea? Was it like, oh, I want to do a fishing game first, or was it, oh, I want to do a sort of Lovecraftian style game, or were they kind of both like, what if we did both together at the beginning, or did they kind of evolve as you went on?
Yeah, I think that one was initially Joel just saying, yeah, cosmic horror fishing, and then so I was like, sounds good. It, like, just from an artist's point of view, just that tagline alone just sounds really interesting and fun to work with. Like, you could take that in so many directions. And then so that was just like, yep, sold, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like big into fishing or anything, but when the idea of Lovecraftian fishing came up, it was immediately just like, has so much potential for atmosphere and all this interesting stuff. So it was quite exciting right from the beginning, the idea.
I'm interested to actually know a little bit, obviously, because you've done a lot of the art for the games, both of you. I want to know kind of, given the fact that sort of Lovecraftian as sort of a term and as a genre and everything has been around for so long, and we've seen so many iterations of sort of Cthulhu and all these Lovecraftian monsters and everything, both in games, outside of games, and even in the books. There's a certain element of like, how do you create something unique without kind of pulling off what, you know, everyone's preconceived notion of Lovecraftian mythology and all that sort of stuff is? Like, how did you approach that? Was it a case of like, let's try and go out and make our own thing, or was it a case of like, let's just add our own inspiration onto sort of the preconceived norm?
I think one of the really good things about that whole Lovecraftian lore and cosmic horror stuff is the fact that it's already incredibly vague as it is. So a lot of things are just like, oh, it's an unfathomable creature and stuff like that, which makes things pretty easy for us to kind of go, all right, what's a cool idea that might be able to be tagged onto this thing that kind of fits within that? We didn't really have to try too hard to kind of match things up with current lore. In fact, we just pretty much went with, let's come up with a cool looking creature sort of thing first and foremost. And then so for that sort of stuff, we just go, and what's messed up in the ocean already? Because there's already some Lovecraftian looking things in the ocean that already exist in real life anyway. And all you got to do is just make them bigger.
Yeah, the best thing about like the whole kind of cosmic horror genre to me is the fact that is the mystery and the part that in each player's brain they make up the horror themselves. So the difficulty isn't in making like cool monsters, it's in kind of like making an environment that fosters people's imaginations to go wild and make themselves kind of spooked. It's more about atmosphere, I think.
Yeah, and I have to say you guys nailed that throughout the game, I have to say, because even the elements of like when you're out at night, like it's very much the sort of simplistic stuff. Like, I mean, this has been covered in previews, so I'm going to touch on a little bit. Obviously, like the eyes when you're starting to get a little bit delirious out in the water. I mean, even the sort of the big fish underneath in some areas of the water, which has messed me up on more than one stage and set me back, but I thoroughly loved getting hit by every time. You know, you did mention as well, you know, there is that element of like, you know, some of the stuff in the original sort of Lovecraft material is described as unfathomable. And I mean, I typically think of the stuff like Color Out of Space, where people have sort of attached the color purple to that, even though it's not described as purple whatsoever. Is there, on the opposite side of that, trying to figure out something, you're kind of boggling your brain, like, oh, why didn't he describe it? Like, this is really annoying. Like, why do I have to come up with all this stuff now? So is there an element of balance to that? Is there a way in which you can go too Lovecraftian or not Lovecraftian enough in your heads for kind of designing all these creatures?
I don't think that really became too much of a concern to us too much. I think, if anything, we were trying to recreate things like, oh, here is this prime example of this particular creature. And then we weren't really going out there to kind of go like, we need to match it exactly for what it's kind of being portrayed as in the stories and stuff. So we just kind of played with the creative license that the whole idea of cosmic horror kind of affords you.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I think it was just, that.
Yeah. A little bit just on sort of the gameplay of the game. I'm not going to dive too deep into programming as we talked about, but I want to ask a little bit on, obviously, the fishing minigame mechanic of Dredge that crops up a lot. You know, that has I think, the unfortunate possibility of really draining some people if it's not done correctly, because if you have to keep doing that over and over again, which initially I thought, oh god, this is going to really annoy me if I have to do this on like the 10th hour of the game and I'm still looking for like this one sea bass that I haven't found yet. But alongside this, you know, I never found that happening. It was continually just always interesting to do. Why do you think that is? And like, is it something that you guys, when you were going through the game, were worried wouldn't catch on with players?
It is. It was a big concern early that we thought that it might be repetitive or get really annoying. I think what worked out really well for us is that we went very simple with the actual fishing minigame, and it's more about, we leaned more into time management as kind of like the core idea for it. So you know, because you played the game, time passes when you're fishing and you've got to keep an eye on the time, and that's really the main thing about fishing. Other than that, it's the inventory management. So we kept the fishing minigame simple to not be like another barrier or something, and that seemed to work out.
Yeah, it's almost as if like the actual minigame itself, like the actual fishing thing, is the first part of the actual fishing loop, and then the next bit is that whole Tetris inventory management side of things. So you're kind of always just like, right, focused on trying to hit those things, and you're not realizing that time is kind of moving forwards. And then you get time to just, all right, now how do I just rotate that fish into place? Oh, let's move this one out of the way. And then you're going back to things. So you're kind of focusing your attention between these two kind of elements without focusing on that main element of actual time that's going on at the top. And then when you realize that's the thing, it's like, oh, I got to go back to shore to set up all these fish and everything as well. So we're trying to keep, it's almost like we're splitting the attention between the players, like kind of like focus. And then that seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah. I think you guys did a fantastic job, by the way, of just being able to diversify the way in which you're having to go and look for specific fish and kind of dealing with different obstacles. And I do want to touch on one small bit, and this could be perceived as maybe a minor spoiler, so if anyone's listening or watching, maybe skip forward like 2 or 3 minutes after I give away this analogy. But there is an element of the game, one of the side missions, where you have to find specific specimens for a scientist or a researcher. And there was one of the fish that I could just not find. I was like, where is this fish? That, like, it was driving me insane. Like, I felt like maybe I was going delirious in real life as well as in the game. But then I think later on I kind of stepped out a bit. And this is a point I want to touch on later, is the sort of the really vast, like, world you guys have made here in Dredge. And I went to one of the other islands, and you unlock bait as sort of a thing you can do for kind of attracting the local wildlife. And I brought it back there, and then I got the fish, and I was like, oh my God, that's so clever. I feel so smart. Like, that was an element that I just thought was really, really phenomenally well done. So pat yourselves on the back for that one if you want, like, but that was just really, really well done. And I want to know, is that a specific thing just to me? Because it's been racking my brain. Is like, is there one of the fishes that's deliberately not able to be caught without the bait? Or is that just me being silly?
You went probably like a really interesting way of getting that particular fish as it is, because I think one of the things, I get the feeling I know which fish it is as well. And then because we try to introduce players into using different types of fishing methods, so this fish probably requires one of those other particular fishing methods, or you have to equip that particular item onto your boat in order to actually catch those things, because that particular fish only appears when you are using that particular fishing thing.
There would have been, there are other ways you can get that fish through upgrading or using different equipment. And there's information in the encyclopedia to help you out. But that way that you got it is really cool, because that's unique to you.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first times I've heard of someone doing that exact thing, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I do also want to point out, I did use the encyclopedia at some points as well. So I learned from my mistakes later on, so it didn't completely brush me by. I want to talk back, because I did mention very briefly that this world in Dredge is a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be. And I think I spent maybe about 3 to 4 hours at the beginning just going from the main area to maybe one of the other side islands, because I was spending so much time exploring. And that's the fantastic thing about it, is that it didn't feel like wasted time either. Whenever you got somewhere, you were constantly doing little tasks, and none of them felt repetitive in any way or form. You were kind of just trying a new stuff. It's like, oh, here, I've unlocked this bit, I'm going to use that. And then, once you go around collecting main story elements, you kind of have more things open up to you as well. I want to talk about, just from an artist's perspective, the four corners of the map, if you will, the 4 different islands. Kind of traditional in the way it's kind of laid out in terms of like game design of like going to different islands. I mean, very much like, going to a new zone of like, it felt very sort of either Crash Bandicoot-y style to me, or maybe a bit of like Sonic the Hedgehog going to a new area. I want to talk about like, what were the sort of iterations you guys did as artists of like kind of getting the particular vibe or sense of scene for those areas, because they are quite different, a lot of them. And how many of them were there before you kind of decided on the core 4 you were going to put in?
Early on, we had, when we were brainstorming, I mean, we came up with a lot of possible ideas for areas, and then we kind of whittled it down to the ones that we wanted to do and the things we thought were interesting and different enough and what we could put in them. But visually, a big part of that was pretty early on in development, we stopped and we took some time to kind of place it. We did like a big prototype of where everything would be in the world, like how far away these islands are going to be, the basic layout of them, and kind of like to get a feel of how far away things should be, and how long that progression should take. And at that time as well, I was kind of visually prototyping with those areas, just like roughly changing shaders and textures and trying things out to see what we might want when we come to actually doing those areas. So out of that, we kind of learned that we want to tweak the fog color in each area. We want to tweak like what the water in the shallows and what the water in the deeper areas looks like. So we could expose those variables, and kind of like what the textures and mood would be. So there was kind of basically, it was like a visual prototyping phase. And then from that, when we went to do the final thing, we looked at that as a reference and then just improved upon it where we could.
Yeah, there's a lot of, once we had the idea of like, all right, we're going to have this zone out in this corner, this zone here, and it's going to look like that. And then when we came to actually working on those particular zones during development, we'd pretty much just get the whiteboard out and draw up on the wall and like, all right, so what do we want the player to actually do within this area? So they have to get the relic, and we want them to kind of go between this zone multiple times, or they have to interact with these things. So what can we put in the way of the player to kind of like make them go around and experience the things that we kind of want them to experience? And then so it's like, oh, let's put fish here. Let's put some like kind of like resources here. Let's put like a kind of like a treasure chest here or something like that. And then just planning that out visually made it easier for us to kind of get an idea for how things might actually play when we actually put it all together. And then of course there's the extensive sort of playtesting that kind of goes into everything there, because that requires a lot of playtesting. Yeah.
I want to just mention, you guys, in one of the areas specifically, I think you've done a fantastic job at like relieving me of a fear I used to have of piranhas, because now it's turned into frustration of piranhas, because they slow my boat down, they attract the mother piranha. It's not a good time, and then I end up going back. The wandering traveler seems to have no problem with whatever's going on. They seem to be fine getting from place to place, but me in that area, absolutely not happening. I must have spent, I think, probably a good chunk of half my time there trying to get around that piranha. I want to talk about just kind of gameplay and story-wise. There is kind of conflicting elements, and I mean, I don't want to bring up the word diegetic storytelling, because I think it's kind of a bit of a nuisance for a lot of game developers at times, because you just want to have fun at the end of the day while also telling a fun story alongside it. But there is elements, obviously, at the beginning of the story where you're kind of encouraged not to go out at night. And then I think it's just because of the way, maybe because I was going into it, and maybe this is a personal experience, but I feel like a lot of people will kind of will relate to this as well, of like, obviously, because as we mentioned, sort of Lovecraft and Cthulhu and all that is such an established part of people's memory that they'll know, like, oh, I want to go out at night, I want to see what all this creepy stuff is. Were you worried a little bit that maybe even when you're trying to be pushed out, I mean, there's one part very near the beginning where you're asked to get a mutated fish, which obviously only happens during the nighttime, so you have to go out and engage in that. But were you kind of worried that maybe players would avoid the nighttime area altogether? I suppose particularly as an artist perspective as well, because you put so much effort into the art style of the night as well. What was sort of the balancing act you were trying to like encourage players to go out, but also not make it feel like, okay, now we're gamifying this area, you need to go out and do this?
I think we kind of were 100% okay with people trying to avoid the night as much as possible in the first place. We wanted, because we're not the biggest horror gamers out there ourselves anyway. And then when we're watching people play, it was actually really interesting watching people that didn't want to go out at night, because they were the ones who were probably more scared of than any other kind of playtester anyway, because they kind of scared themselves and that, oh, I got to get back. And then so we wanted people to kind of choose the way that they kind of want to play the game in general anyway. So we get the people that just want to play the cozy fishing game and then just go around catching all the different types of fish. And you can pretty much play the majority of the game without actually having to interact with much of the kind of night or the sanity mechanics whatsoever for the most part. There might be a couple bits here and there, but for the most part, you can play it super safe. And then there's also stuff out there for the people that do want to kind of experience all of that stuff. And I think we kind of tried to make the game accommodate a bunch of different play styles as well. Of course, there are certain things that people that do venture out and become a little bit more courageous to find out more things, there's more kind of things hidden in the world for those particular players as well. So depending on how you play it, your experience will be completely different to someone else's. And I think that's what we kind of wanted to encourage people to do.
Yeah, and in terms of art and putting effort in and people who are missing it, I actually love doing a whole bunch of art or putting things in that a lot of people will miss. I think it makes for, everybody will have a slightly unique playthrough if you have a lot of possibly missable or unique stuff. I mean, that's one of my favorite things in a lot of my favorite games is like the hidden stuff, the stuff that the developers put effort into make that is completely optional. So I love it.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite creatures in the game, I don't think everyone's going to really see it firsthand, but still kind of cool to know that someone will eventually see it somewhere and then might get really spooked by it or just really get that sort of feel out of it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to say as well, like, obviously, I think the side content in this game really adds so much more depth to the world of Dredge, because it's like you could easily, I think, imaginably go through the main course of this story in maybe 2 to 3 hours and maybe get it finished. But you'd be missing out on so much great stuff that the game has to offer, because I found so much of the most like enjoyable aspects of the game were from doing the side content and just exploring around and going around the boat. I think I probably spent too much time kind of on my own in the ocean just listening to the music and just being like, oh, this is nice now. And then as night came along, I was like, excuse my language, but oh shit, I need to go back now. It's just
there are a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of
I need
moments.
to ask. Yeah, no, 100%. I need to ask you guys though a little bit, because obviously fishing is a huge part of this game, and you mentioned there's like a simplified aspect of doing the fishing, but you also have the huge encyclopedia of books, and then you have also the new rods and everything you can get. Who is the fishing expert amongst you, or did you have to bring someone in for that?
Oh, it's 100% Joel.
Joel's probably the closest to being the fishing expert and stuff. I think like you haven't actually dabbled in any fishing yourself, ever.
Not really.
And then I've done a little bit before, but I think I was doing some like handline fishing one time, and then put some bait into the water, and then next minute like a squid started like attacking that bait and it was flashing red and white, and that was kind of one of those nope, not doing that again. So that was probably one of the last times I ever went fishing. So that's kind of cool.
Well, you absolutely now for launch day need to go fishing. Maybe just stay away from. It's the perfect way to do it as well. I mean, you're going to be worried about reviews. You're going to be worried about what people think. Just go away from it all. Go fishing, and then just you'll come back and thit'll be completely fresh.
Yeah, we've actually planned a boat, so I think our launch day we're going to be on a boat.
We're going out on a boat. Yeah. I'm now excited.
Fantastic, amazing. I suppose I've only got a couple more questions I want to ask you guys. Mainly, I just want, on launch day when people finally get their hands on the game fully, what are you hoping they'll get most out of it?
I guess I'm hoping they just get an experience that they actually enjoy, because like we mentioned, we tried to make it so that you can play it in different ways. And then so I'm looking forward to people kind of uncovering things by accident and then sharing that out with people, or just saying like, oh man, did you see this thing? And I was like, no, where was that thing? So those sort of things, like people finding out those little hidden things we put in the world, that's for me is what I'm excited about seeing. And I hope that people kind of get really interested in finding when they start following little breadcrumbs to things and then just getting lost in the game.
Yeah, for me, it's the same. We've tried our best to make it so that the game is accessible if you want to just go through it at your own pace and maybe just on the surface level do the quests and get through it. But I really hope that some people who want to dig deeper get something satisfying, or it gets their brains working and they have their own theories and they can craft like ideas in their head about what's actually happening, get closer to the truth.
Finally, before we get into the last question, the penultimate question, the really important question to both of you as artists, and talking about the fish yet again. Favorite fish to design, and like the fish you hated designing that you wanted to be done, that you wanted to scrap as soon as you got it finished.
I have one that I really don't like, and I did not like doing, and it's called the Crown of Thorns. And if you catch it in the game, you will also hate it because it's kind of a trash trash fish. Well, crab. What is it?
Like starfish, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Brutal starfish.
I don't know why, but yeah, that was for some reason my least favorite. My favorite one is probably, I really like the barrel eye fish, which is kind of in Stellar Basin area. It's a weird fish, and it's a real fish. Yeah.
Yep. And as far as doing like the monsters, because I was mainly handling most of the monsters, Alex was the one stuck drawing all the fish for the most part. I kind of like doing like probably the fish that you kind of kept encountering at the very start and everything as well. So he was like, the whole idea behind that one was really fun. I really enjoyed that one, as well as like the really epic giant monster that kind of appears at some points in the game if you're lucky enough to come across it. But yeah, as far as like the kind of fish that were designed, I still like the cod.
But just the basic cod.
Cod. Yeah. It's just something about it. I was just like, it's like come across like, oh, that's not a straight line. That's a weird shape. And then this is the shape behind it, and then just the look of it. It's just like, yeah, there's something cool about that one. Yeah.
Finally, to kind of bring it all back round circle, I mean, talking about how you guys make your games, I would be stupid not to ask, what's next before the game even comes out? What's next? Are you guys just gonna be like, no, let's just take a break for a month? Or are you guys already thinking about what the next game you're gonna do is, and are you gonna dive straight into that? Is it something maybe you're hoping to do a bit more Lovecraftian stuff again, or is it again just something completely different you guys want to encounter?
I think it's a little bit of
or can you say, I should say.
Yeah. I think that we want to see how kind of Dredge kind of goes, and we'll see if it's like, oh man, people really want more of this sort of thing. Then we'll have a look at like, all right, let's give the people what they want, I guess. But I think going forward to the future, I think no matter what we do, there's probably going to be elements of like the whole atmosphere and mood. I think that's really important to at least us on the outside, where we just want to have those kind of like really kind of things that just take you out of the real world and just immerse you in that kind of world. And whatever that might be, I'm not too sure yet, but those are the things that we're kind of interested in really pushing.
Yeah, I think we have a real shared interest in building atmospheric worlds and worlds that feel like real or lived in, or that's something that all of us love. So whatever it is, you can be sure that we're going to focus. There'll be a heavy focus on that somewhere. You know?
Well, fantastic. I, for one, cannot wait to see what you guys do next. And I will be, again, probably diving into Dredge for even more stuff because I can't get enough of it at this stage. I will be seeing its praises hopefully when it releases on, I say hopefully, it will be releasing on March the 30th, 2023. If I'm correct, because I looked up and this game seems to be releasing nearly everywhere. Releasing on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, Nintendo Switch, PC, Linux and Mac. Is that a thing as well?
Not right now.
Well, that will need to be checked because I looked up platforms it's releasing on, said Linux and Mac, and I thought, no way, that's not happening. It's just Google, so maybe it's my own fault. Again, thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Best of luck with the game releasing on the 30th of March, of course. And I mean, again, I would love to do a follow-up conversation at some point later on down the line so we can dive into all the spoilery stuff of Dredge.
Yeah,
sounds awesome. Yeah.